when Cloud briefly saved Aerith from being stabbed, what actually happened, and how does that tie in to these worlds? I initially thought that Cloud was having a mental breakdown, and I don't really think that anymore. Now that I've sort of sorted through all these questions, and I put these questions in order to kind of lead us to this, as not that this is the most important question, but like we needed to address what Sephiroth is doing, how the Whispers play into it, in order to get to the point where my perspective on this moment is that Cloud actually did save Aerith in that moment. I think Cloud, who's super down on himself, doesn't think he has the potential to do this kind of stuff, actually succeeds at saving Aerith. And afterwards she says, I see what you did there, thank you. I think it fits so perfectly that if Sephiroth is the master of the Whispers, and Sephiroth has the ability and is constantly overriding reality with alternate versions of reality that are darker, that Cloud would actually succeed at saving Aerith, and then you see a wash of Whispers just flood across the screen, and then boom, Sephiroth's preferred outcome has now been swapped in. He has merged a dream world where Aerith has died into the real world as a way to get what he wants, but also as a way to like break Cloud even further. He's like, you thought you saved her? Guess what? Boom, it's worse now. You had hope, I took it away. So that's my personal current interpretation of that scene, is that Cloud saved Aerith, period, and Sephiroth used his Whisper powers to override reality with a more negative version of it. And I'm sure there's going to be a couple of very different opinions on this, so I'm curious to hear what y'all think.
SubTXT, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sound great.
You're all good.
So the thing. So okay. So as I said, when we talked about what are the worlds, I do think they are, the dreams, the sort of like memories, lived experience, memories, as well as memories of things that didn't happen, and that the live stream treats equally. And I do think that so what happens there is Cloud has a belief that he intercepts the attack, blocks it, parries it, exactly what we saw, right? And in that moment, his belief is that he does it and he's successful. Obviously, in the reality that we all live in, or the entire party lives in, that is not what happened. In the reality that we all exist in the Beagleverse, Aerith is killed. So, but that said, as I've talked about, and I think Sleepezi mentioned earlier, because the live stream treats these things equally, the lived realities and the sort of unrealized dreams, and it in turn makes them real in sort of like equal ways. And so there's been this conversation, right, of like, what is the real thing? And we keep talking about this game, we keep talking about this trilogy in terms of binaries, right? Like, did Zack live, or is he just in the live stream? And then we end up getting into Rebirth, and we all had we all landed on one side or the other for the most part before Rebirth came out. It was either this or that. And when Rebirth comes around, we end up all finding out it's actually both. Like, it all happens within the live stream, but it is also real in some very real way. Kind of brought to life, I think the most clear evidence is being able to take the white materia from Aerith's dream and bringing it to our reality, passing it from one existence to another, one world to another. So much so that Cloud is then holding the empty materia in our real world at the end. That materia he should not have, and he got it from some dream reality in the live stream. Yet it is just as real in his fingertips on that hill as it was when Aerith passed it to him in her dream. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I like to bring it to Final Fantasy X for a second. Like, like people seem to make a big argument about this white materia as like a big proof of something, but like I don't see why there would be any issue between a dream becoming real. Like they've already done this with Final Fantasy X. Dreams Anarchind was basically a physical reality being summoned, and then things from that dream can come into the real world and it's fine. It's just like they have a spiritual origin. So I've never really understood why it would matter whether something is real or not if it just came from a fake place. Now it's real. Like it's a fantasy game. They've done this. I think that all coincides pretty organically, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I have such a vague recollection of Final Fantasy X, but also I'll take your word for it. But I mean, I guess that's also what Tidus is, right? Like Tidus technically, you know, exists and he's with everyone, and then you know has to go at the very end. That's about that's about the extent that I remember of FF10.
Yeah, there's some very interesting like analysis. Like Resident Arc has a very long series, very in-depth, very good series breaking down Final Fantasy X, and they point out some very interesting things I never even thought about. And they basically say that the game is pitching Dreams Anarchind, which is where Tidus is from, Dream Tidus. They're pitching that as being the exact same as when you summon what an Aeon is what they're called in 10. You can summon an Aeon from a spiritual realm. It's real. It breathes fire on the enemy and they die. You could summon whatever else from that world. And considering it's from the same writers, it seems like there's a lot of parallels to how they're treating these live stream worlds here.
Yeah. And so how that all relates to what happens at the end. So I think Cloud conceives of himself saving Aerith, her living on, and that becomes a dream reality, you know, that's kind of manifested and owned by him in some way.
Do you think Go ahead.
Sorry. And then I think the biggest clue as to because the conversation has been, well, does it matter, right? Like, is it even real? All we just discussed. And I think what makes it even more real is that we have a third party view that dream, and the third party is Tifa, because I think when Tifa runs up to the altar, we see the flash and the Genova flashing kind of thing happens, and we see bloody Aerith and Aerith without any blood. And when it's the thing that's discussed in the NPC dialogue that has potentially been overlooked is that it says that what if, like the woman's theory is, what if when you come in contact with the spiritual energy, you are able to peer through the looking glass. And then in the Japanese it says, if you accidentally come into contact with the live stream, you know, what if you could see into other worlds?
Yeah, so that makes sense to me for Tifa. Is it just because Cloud has Mako in him that he's able to do this? Like, when recently did Cloud come into contact with like a massive amount of live stream energy?
It's not Cloud. Tifa came into contact with the live stream in Chapter 9.
But Tifa wasn't even there when Cloud deflected the flash to this other world that you're saying and deflected.
He's not talking about that.
He's talking about
a little bit after, yeah.
Yeah. I thought you were saying that when Tifa has those flashes, she's having flashes just like Cloud was able to flash to this dream world where he saved her.
No, I'm just saying that, like, because like she runs up to the altar, flashes appear. It's looking from a third person perspective at Cloud and Aerith from Tifa's viewpoint. Like, we see her face, it centers on the scene of Cloud and Aerith. The sort of flashes happen where we see the blood and we don't see and we see no blood, and then it cuts back to Tifa's face, confused. And so I think because of her exposure to the live stream, she has latent sort of ability to it's infected her in some way, to the point that she can occasionally see through the veil, right? And so I think she's
that connection to the Cosmo Canyon NPC. That's very interesting.
So I think she's seeing Cloud's imagined world, but she can't see it all the time. It's also Cloud's, dream. That's why later on it's a momentary thing, and she doesn't even know what to make of it.
But what is this live stream Cloud dream? How is that? Where is that coming from? How is that a thing? And why did Cloud see himself there in this moment?
because it's an unrealized dream, right? It's an unrealized desire of the heart, as the Cosmic Canon NPC put it, right? Like he saw himself potentially doing it. He believed himself able to do it. And so the live stream treated that as legitimate, but it's not in the prime reality. It's just a conception in his mind that now lives in the live stream and he potentially access at some point.
Why did it happen?
Sleepezi
Why did it happen at this moment and only to Cloud and only right now?
I don't know the exact answer, but it just seems like as much of a breaking of fate as any other breaking of fate that we've seen throughout the game.
I do think that there's definitely some distinguishing aspects to that scene that the game has very specifically laid out to sort of give us some context. For instance, I think it has already been brought up that there's a certain authorship of what we're seeing and how we're seeing it. So in Zach's reality, we're only dealing with, you know, non-Beagle related sort of tangential worlds. And when those are happening, Zach has a vast influence on those things because he's not flowing with the entire consciousness of all of the live stream. But when Cloud tries to author his own sort of version of what he wants, and just jumping off of this, just sort of, I guess, because we're kind of talking about Aerith's death, based off of the question is that I think multiple authors are saying no, that this is not, you can't compete just one person to sort of author reality. So I think Aerith and Sephiroth both desire this conclusion, and also the game has hinted at the fact that Aerith has to die. It is a consistent, a constant of all realities via Loveless, that all roads lead to her death in some aspect. So, and even to throw in the horrible line that Red 13 says is that like a part of this is meant to happen. Like what is happening at the Temple of the Ancients is supposed to happen, and intentionally done so by Aerith. So, because that was sort of an answer to that, to the discussion at large, I'm going to kind of just go back to who I really think is authoring that choice is Aerith. Mm-hmm. I think Aerith is the one, it's not Sephiroth. I think the reason why we feel that it's Sephiroth is because Aerith is using similar tactics as Sephiroth would to help Cloud rather than manipulate him. So one of these things that happens is once we've beaten Sephiroth and we're sort of introduced back into the scene where Aerith is dead, a white whisper passes over the camera, meaning that we are transitioning out of a Sephiroth world into a authored Aerith sort of perception of reality, or whatever you want to think of the white whispers as, or whoever is dictating that. One of the things that happens during this exact scene is that all of the party vanishes. So the reason that that's important is because that world, that white world, is now removing people who could influence Cloud into having to deal with this moment. But because it's a white world thing and an Aerith thing, that gets a little confusing, because the way that Sephiroth secludes Cloud is by literally trying to damage his relationships at a fundamental level. So he's gone after Tifa in this, and now and he's gone after his like other parts of his identity in the past. But the reason why this is super important is because Sephiroth, even though Aerith is doing this to protect Cloud, it puts Sephiroth in a very he has the advantage now, because Aerith is also creating this reasonable doubt that Sephiroth can use to paint a picture to kind of manifest his reality into a more certainty later. So even though like Aerith is able to shroud this event in mystery for now, it just seems like Sephiroth is just going to take full advantage of Cloud's sort of cluelessness that he's kind of been put into. for good reason, because if she hadn't done it, and because of all the work that Sephiroth had done up until that point, he would have broke, and that would have just instigated Sephiroth's plan to sort of fruition, I think, towards the end. It's sort of how she showed up at the end to begin with, is that at that point it was just him trying to get literally everyone out of Cloud's head. Zack showed up, he got rid of him, and now it's just Sephiroth and him, and then Aerith comes in to save him one last time, and then that's it. Now, that's it.
I'm open to all these possibilities. Personally, I'm not really sure how Aerith would be able to use any powers, whisper powers, whatever, to give a human a delusion inside their mind. I feel like the Occam's Razor, when you already have Dream Daddy Sephiroth controlling the whispers to override reality with alternate versions, I feel like the simplest answer is just he saved Aerith and Sephiroth changed it. I don't know if that's actually what happened, but I feel like I'm not really sure where Aerith would get a power like that. Also, while either you respond to that or Clark potentially gives his answer, I'm going to step out of the room for... Oh, subtext is back. I'm going to step out of the room for 1 minute while y'all continue, but I can still hear you, and I'll be back in just a couple
Got
seconds.
it.
Can you
I
all
was
hear
just
me
going to
real
say...
quick?
Yeah, we can hear you.
You're
So,
totally back.
yeah,
go for it.
I do have an answer. I do think that there, the way that all consciousness is shared in the live stream, it is a manifestation of the live stream. The fact that there are individual consciousness does not mean that the live stream would have any, any barrier in between it. We see a lot of live stream capable, Mako capable things affect people's current consciousness. We see, Cloud getting flashes of the future when he touches people, etc. in Remake. So I don't think there's actually any barriers, without knowing the full mechanics of the live stream. That said, the reason I think that Aerith is the one that is actualizing that reality where Cloud saved her, is because that's when the prayer happens. Like that. I think that is the role of the white materia. Like the white materia, holy, all that stuff is still this amorphous, functional thing. It does more than we know yet. So does Meteor, and they're adding this element of dichotomization between black and white, and I think it's because there are more mechanics hidden behind there. The reason why I think it's specifically Aerith, I think that is, there's a bunch of dialogue that points to how different time works in the live stream. I do think that from a causal POV, so like not temporal but non-temporal causation sort of perspective, so the originating event of Aerith's consciousness in the live stream, I actually think that starts the moment
right
that
there.
she dies right there.
Yeah.
So the Aerith that we see in the dream sequence has already died and been being chased through these errant worlds by Sephiroth, and that it was still a play of hers to feed on the desires of Cloud to save her in that moment. Because Sephiroth very clearly responds to Aerith in the white space during that fight, praising her for her behavior here, because it's clear that she has countered his movement in this. His movement was to bring on despair onto Cloud and break Cloud, and it seems like this was a counter by Aerith. To me, that's the way that I have interpreted this scene for a long time. And so I think that it is in fact Aerith that is materializing this errant world where she survives, and that this is the birth of live stream Aerith, which we see throughout so far we've seen her in different places and different times within Remake and Rebirth now. So I do think that that's the beginning of Omni Aerith, is that moment. You know, is the moment where Cloud actualizes this desire. And I think he doesn't have the ability to do that because he's not a Cetra, but Aerith with the white materia does, you know, and that's probably a function of an amorphous function of the white materia, and you know, mobilizing the white whispers, etc. You know, but they all seem to agree, you know, in this kind of Looper mentality. By the way, I did want to say I thought Looper was fantastic. That is one thing I'll say.
Yes.
So yeah.
I haven't seen it since it came out. I literally don't even remember it.
To quickly follow up on that with a question, Clark.
Yeah.
Because you linked it to the white materia, and I do think there's. I remember in the original game there was a thing like when you go back to the Forgotten Capital with Bugenhagen, and you see the vision of the white materia, and it talks about it responds to the prayer, but it's kind of unexpected in the way that it does respond to the prayer, right? Like we don't know how it responds exactly.
Right.
I don't know if this is what you were saying, but the way I interpreted what you were saying was in her prayer, she talks about protecting her friends, right? Like take care of them, or whatever she says.
Yes.
So is the manifestation of this reality, this dream, kind of Holy's response to that prayer in some ways trying to protect Cloud, trying to protect reality from being reunited by Sephiroth? Is that what you were getting at?
100%.
There.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well put.
I think that is actually exactly where I think we've talked about this before in other streams, but this is where this circles back to the original game and Sephiroth trapping this in the heart of the planet is this thing that Aerith is summoning. So I have been just of the belief that we're just working our way back to sort of like the structure that Remake sort of put out, where you have a group of people who are trying to save the planet, and there's this evil force that is sort of essentially taking control of an asset that needs to be freed, and then it becomes Operation Save Aerith at the end. And that is ultimately what happens in Final Fantasy VII is that it's like, let's go free her memories, essentially, which is what they sort of start to ponder and question, is what Holy is sort of the last like sort of effort of Aerith. Her dream in the context of Rebirth is what Holy is creating. And I think that that's sort of going to semi-swap out of the discussion with Sephiroth and the party at the very end of the game, where he says instead of it being Aerith's memories, it's going to be these are Aerith's dreams that we're trying to save, because it's bigger than the concept of memory at this point. This is what will eventually kind of be the turning point in people's heads of, is this a remake or is this semi-sequel? It's her dreams rather than the memory of.
I have another follow-up. Sorry.
Go for it.
And
then we'll get to the last question after.
The only because I don't know the answer, but I'm just chasing down questions at this point. Because I really like the theory of it being this thing that was activated by Aerith. I guess a question is in the final fight where Aerith comes back and fights with Cloud. She seems to address him and say, I saw what you did back there. Thank you. I'm just curious what you all think that means, or what was meant by that question. Like, what is it that
were you in the call when I mentioned that, or were you MIA at that point? I was MIA. Well, based on my current very loose theory that because Sephiroth has the power of the Whispers to override reality with alternate darker versions, it seems pretty straightforward that Cloud saved Aerith, and Sephiroth was like, you got a little hope there? Well, I'm gonna rip it away now. uses the whispers. I think they just literally cover the screen at that point. And then he's like, you know what? I actually stabbed her. You failed because you're awful at everything and you'll never save anybody, yada yada. And then when she says thank you, I think she means thank you for literally saving me. That's it.
I mean, I think that what he's thanking her for, as I saw what you did back there, was her thanking Cloud for having that dream of saving her, because I think it allowed her to manifest her power in that situation. And it is specifically Sephiroth responding to her when he says, I underestimated you. Because at the end of this, Cloud still does not believe he failed. We're not going into part 3 with Cloud, with Sephiroth successfully convincing Cloud that he was unsuccessful, you know. So that's where I'm at. I think there's a relationship between the two decisions, but what Aerith is thanking Cloud for is the desire to save her, you know.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to lean heavily into the Occam's Razor answers for simplicity, but this is a Nomura Nojima joint, so
yeah,
Occam's Razor may not apply.
I think
and you have to apply it to both statements. You have to apply Sephiroth's response to Aerith and Aerith's response to Cloud. Like, you have to, what's the simplest answer for both? Can they both be true somehow? And I think the only way you can make both of those answers be true together via Occam's Razor is to have this, you know, somewhat unsatisfying idea that it's both of them. You know, it's both Cloud's desire and, you know, perhaps Aerith's power, you know, or Aerith's prayer or desire that have created this possibility. And I do think there's a lot to say that this is a response to Sephiroth from Aerith. And I do think this is the beginning of Omni Aerith, but that's a wild swing, I'm sure.
Yeah, I agree with the Omni Aerith thing for sure.
I also think that there is an interesting thing to take note of is that once Aerith appears in the sort of Sephiroth world to save Cloud in that moment, to step in, is that the last time we saw the space that Aerith manifests is that it is plentiful with water, and in the final fight it's just pools, like sort of separated, just sort of a lot less of that there. So it I think in my head is assumed that Aerith is using just the slightest of the rest of her influence in that moment before sort of the divergence is what I do think is happening before the separation of worlds again, to try and interfere and sort of block Sephiroth's sort of, you know, his plan. But I agree with Clark entirely, which is that it's the fact that there's something very powerful in Final Fantasy VII about, like, again, going back to just Final Fantasy in general, is like this power of will, and for Cloud to even be spurred on so fervently to respond that way, that is his strength. That is also what ends up killing Sephiroth in Advent Children, is the same feeling that Cloud is having. So I think, and this also comes back to lines that happened in Remake, is that Cloud's like, I'm coming for you, and she's like, thank you. And it's not that he may succeed, it is the fact that she is appreciating Cloud for who he is and the trueness of that character to his actual self. So yes, with all of the other strings attached to what that means. Yeah.